Throughout the mid-20th century, a communist sentiment was growing. It began in Russia, then China, eventually making its way into Southeast Asia. Caught in the crossfires of the Vietnam War, Cambodia was thrown into disarray. It was during this time of hardship that the Khmer Rouge grew in power, taking over Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. The government was known as Democratic Kampuchea. The party running it had many names: the Khmer Rouge to the world, the Angkar to the Cambodians, and the Communist Party of Kampuchea on paper. The name of the Khmer Rouge stands for the Red Khmer, red being their political ideology of communism, and Khmer being the main ethnic Cambodian group in Cambodia. Over the span of the 4 years they were in control, the Khmer Rouge revolutionized Kampuchea into a communist state, transforming it into a classless, agricultural, agrarian society. The Khmer Rouge destroyed education, indoctrinated people, and ultimately caused the genocide of a quarter of Cambodia's population, leaving it a deeply flawed and broken country. Cambodia had been put under a French protectorate since 1863, originally set in place to protect the country from the neighboring Thai and Vietnamese. However, in the midst of post-World War II decolonization and rising opposition by the Khmer, especially the Khmer Israk and Free Khmer movements, France relinquished their colonial power to King Norodom Sihanouk of Cambodia in 1953. In 1955, King Norodom Sihanouk abdicated the throne to pursue position in politics. Now Prince Sihanouk led the Sangkamir Saniam regime under Cambodia's parliamentary monarchy. Under this regime, he focused on maintaining Cambodian neutrality amidst the many wars in Southeast Asia and on shutting down dissenters, mainly rogue communist groups like the Khmer Viet Minh and later Khmer Rouge. Following independence, Cambodia heavily relied on China and Russia for support, receiving large grants and making treaties with them. The rise of communism was far on its way, cascading the world into Cold War. Meanwhile, the Vietnam War caused chaos and instability throughout Southeast Asia. The communist Viet Cong took a presence within Cambodia prior to 1970. As a result, the US brought bombing raids into Cambodia, further destabilizing the country. In April of 1970, while on a foreign trip, Prince Sihanouk was overthrown via a coup d'etat by his prime minister, Lon Nol. As a result, the pro-American Khmer Republic was instated, a regime heavily reliant on US support. Under Lon Nol, he attempted to shut down opponents to his government and push out ethnic Vietnamese due to seeing them as Cambodia's enemy. This move eventually led to the civil war between the aforementioned Khmer Republic and the growing Khmer Rouge movement. Due to the instability caused by the Civil War, more and more people joined this communist cause. After 5 years of fighting and the US pulling out their support, Lon Nol's government was left weak and susceptible to takeover. In April of 1975, Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, was captured by the Khmer Rouge, ending the Khmer Republic. Led by Pol Pot, they attempted to rebuild society to be classless, based solely upon the ideals of communism. They set the calendar to year zero, restarting Cambodian history. The Angkar's far leftist goals called for the complete destruction of private property and money. In the new Kampuchea, there was no need for such things. Everyone provided for the state, and thus the state would provide for them. In practice, though, this failed drastically. First, the Khmer Rouge went after Lon Nol's government, killing anyone associated with the pro-Western government immediately. They then attacked those involved in class politics, involving merchants, teachers, and more. They additionally abolished schools, currency, and religion. One of the pillars of previous Cambodian society that the Khmer Rouge attacked was education. Pol Pot shut down all previous teaching institutions, replacing the curriculum with one that resulted in more hands-on learning that would be more applicable for their rice-growing society. Ultimately, they killed 80% of teachers and the majority of academics to get this done. As education was poor and illiteracy rates high, songs were used to promote politics. Many spoke of the urge to work lands and of revolutionary ideals for the country. In terms of education, they preached ideas that work was the best education for young Cambodians. They saw themselves as rebuilding a new Cambodia from the ground up. The government sorted people into two new groups, known as the Old People and the New People. The Old People were those rural farmers prior to the Angkar takeover, those that already fit the agrarian rice farming style life. The New People were those prosecuted, the city dwellers, the educated, and the wealthy. They were forced out of their homes and out into the countryside to work the fields, stripped of any rights that they had in previous society. The Khmer Rouge was run by a series of cadres that would overlook agricultural ventures. They were strict and merciless. Additionally, children were used. Indoctrinated from a young age, they would become some of the fiercest perpetrators of violence. They knew nothing better than to do what was told. Children were often taught to handle small guns and to plant landmines. The Communist Party of Kampuchea's Super Great Leap Forward plan outlined that Cambodia should increase their rice production threefold with no additional equipment or capital from foreign nations. The goal was to be economically independent, however, it failed drastically. Rice production failed to reach expected levels due to being burdened by war, the lack of capital, and tech. The majority of people were only given a small ration of rice every day to sustain themselves. Thanks to their heavy workloads, they suffered from constant hunger, eventually leading to starvation as a result. Starvation was one of the leading killers under the regime. The Khmer Rouge also had several camps to deal with traitors. The most documented was S-21. It held dissenters, political enemies, ethnic minorities, and their relatives. Once there, they'd be subjected to torture until a confession was given. Afterwards, they'd be disposed of in one of the thousands of killing fields in Cambodia. Starvation and murder ultimately accounted for the genocide of the estimated 1.7 million dead from the Khmer Rouge regime. In January of 1979, the Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia and overthrew the Khmer Rouge, sending them into a government in exile. The remnants of the Khmer Rouge remained near the Thai border until the late 1990s, when Pol Pot died and top leadership defected. In the end, a quarter of Cambodia's population was killed. Out of thousands of academics, only 87 managed to survive the Khmer Rouge regime, a self-inflicted genocide. Nowadays, 60% of Cambodia's population was born after the Khmer Rouge. In the early 21st century, a Khmer Rouge tribunal was opened. However, only 3 people were ever formally charged for the crimes of the Khmer Rouge. Most cadres claimed that they had also been victims, forced to conform to the regime or die. The Khmer Rouge was a genocidal regime. However, legally, they're only charged with 2 counts of genocide against the Vietnamese and Cham Muslims, which only account for a mere 5% of deaths out of the 1.7 million dead. The other 95% ethnically Khmer people murdered is not labeled as a genocide by the UN. Rather, it was a crime against humanity. The UN's definition of genocide requires intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The Khmer Rouge didn't intend the eradication of ethnic Cambodians. Rather, the system was built upon shutting down intellectuals, opposers, and dissenters. Socially, the label of genocide carries a much higher emotional weight than crimes against humanity. This is why the informal label of genocide is needed to draw more people into this case of mass murder. In Cambodia, poverty rates are high and education low, with the majority of people earning under $50 USD a month and the average education level being at only 5 years. Corruption in the state also remains a problem, showing the effects of the Khmer Rouge policies even today. According to the 2012 Cambodian Mental Health Survey conducted by the Department of Psychology of the Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia's suicide rate is 2.5 times the world rate. Additionally, the rate of PTSD is around 7 times higher. The phenomenon of box spot represents a shared cultural trauma caused by the Khmer Rouge. It means broken courage and is characterized by silent suffering. Many Cambodian phrases emphasize this silence. Ultimately, Cambodians choose to move on. They look to the future rather than dwelling on an objectively horrific past. Even the Khmer Rouge cadres were both the perpetrators and victims of violence and loss, neither held accountable nor justified. All in all, the Khmer Rouge regime overhauled Kampuchea into a communist state, completely taking apart previous social structures and replacing them with ones that matched their agrarian lifestyle. Through destroying education, shutting down dissenters, and failing to provide basic necessities, their legacy is now solely characterized by the retraction of progress, removal of human rights, and ultimately genocide.